Welcome to a session on mlonazure.com. In this session, we're going to be exploring how to deal with data in the Azure Machine Learning Service. The author of this session is Sam Istefan, a National AI Architect at Microsoft. We will be covering these four core concepts: workspace, compute, data store, and data set. This area here that we see inside the Azure Machine Learning Service is called a workspace. Within this workspace, you have many different assets on the left-hand side. We will be covering compute, which is where a data scientist will spin up their workstation and work. Data stores, which is where you create connection strings back to your data. And finally, data sets, where you actually register specific data sets from your data stores into the Azure Machine Learning Service. Let's get into a demo. Here what you see is the Azure portal. I have clicked on New, and this is where you go and spin a new Machine Learning Service workspace. So you simply click on New, click on AI plus Machine Learning, and then Machine Learning. From here, you'll be prompted with a very simple form to fill out. You can go through and fill this out. There is a tutorial on mlonazure.com that talks through the components of this form. Let's fast forward to a workspace that I have created ahead of time. This is our workspace. If I was to go to the Home tab, we can see here, this is where it says Welcome to Studio. This is considered your workspace. In this case, this workspace is called mlonazure-ws. From here, what we would like to do is go into Compute, and this is where a data scientist will work. You can see here I've spun up a compute called mlonazure-compute F4S. But if you don't have a compute spun up, you simply click on New, and you give it a name as well as select the virtual machine size that you would like. You can see it ranges from very small VMs, 1 core, 3.5 gigs of RAM, and if we sort this, we can go all the way up to 4 terabytes of RAM as well as 128 cores. If you have a need for GPUs, then you can switch to GPUs and go up to 8 GPUs here. Once you have spun up your compute instance, you are presented with the application URIs for Jupyter Lab, Jupyter RStudio, and SSH if you have configured an SSH key. We will go into Jupyter Lab. Upon clicking on Jupyter Lab, this takes us to our Jupyter Lab environment, where we'll walk through a notebook that I've put together that talks about how to register a data store and a data set. You will see here on the left-hand side that I have my data set here, train, test, and submission CSV, all under this local directory within my workstation. This data set comes from Kaggle, where they currently have a competition on week 4 on COVID-19 global forecasting. And you can see here, there is a train, test, and submission CSVs. I have taken those CSVs and uploaded them into my workspace, here. What I'd like to do from here now is walk you through how to go from the data sitting locally to the data sitting in an external data store. So first thing is first, what we'll do here is import the Azure ML core, and then import some helper libraries from their workspace, data store, and data set, which are our focus for this session. The first step here is we need to say workspace from config. This brings back the workspace object based on the configuration here. When you spin up an Azure Machine Learning workspace, this configuration file is pre-created for you. If you are working from your own local laptop, then you have to create this configuration file. From there, we'll take the workspace object and get back the default data store, and then we'll print out some information about this. So let's go ahead and run this cell. Once this cell runs, you'll see that it brought back the workspace name is mlonazure-ws. There is a resource group, and there is the default storage account. And this is the storage account that we will take the data from our local Jupyter environment here and upload it into this default storage account, and hence separating storage from compute, so that way if other data scientists want to get to this data set, they can get to it as well. In this next cell, we simply do datastore.getDefault, so we can see the data store name, but more importantly, we can see the container that will contain all of the data and folders underneath it. As we fast forward here, then we will see the simple step that takes the data store, which is our default data store, and uses the upload method to upload everything that's in this local dataset / COVID-19 into a folder called My Datasets. If we go into our blob storage here, so this is our workspace, and you can see this is the storage that's associated with it. This is the blob storage, that's the default data store. As we go into this, we'll see here there is no folder called My Dataset right now. We'll hit refresh, and you see there's no folder called My Dataset. So what we will do is go here and run the upload method, and this now has uploaded all of those files underneath the COVID-19. So the folder, the zip file, as well as all of the CSV files into this area here. If we click refresh, we will see My Datasets. So there's My Datasets, and we will see our folder here, COVID-19 Global Forecasting Week 4. And as we go into this, we have our CSV files in here. If we go back to our Jupyter lab here, the next step we want to do is, now that we have a data store, now we want to actually grab the train file from that data store. So far we've uploaded our files into our default data store, which was already there for us when we spun up the machine learning workspace. The next step we want to do is take our file, this train.csv, and register it as a data set. And specifically in Azure Machine Learning, there are two types of data sets. There are tabular data sets and file data sets. I like working with tabular data sets when I'm dealing with CSV files. If you're working with image files, then it's better to use file data sets. In fact, that's all that you can use. Think of tabular data sets as data sets that are going to be data sets you want to switch to a pandas data frame, or you want to switch to a Spark data frame and do things with that data. Look at it as a data frame. And then think of file data sets as data sets that you want to simply deal with the file as a whole and not deal with the content of the actual file. So in this case, we're going to say dataset.tabular.from delimited file. And in this case, we're doing from delimited because this is a CSV file, but we could have also connected to a SQL database, we could have connected to Parquet files, etc. So we get back that dataset, and this dataset is going to look for this specific file within this data store. And we're going to name the data set COVID-19_train and register this data set into our Azure Machine Learning workspace under the name COVID-19_train. Give it a description and some tags that are helpful for later on to understand this data set, and then create a new version. So this is one of the powerful things about actually registering a data set, is being able to version them, and hence being able to specifically point out which data set was used for training which model. As the data set gets updated, then you'll always be able to go back to the version that was used to train the model that's currently in production. That's one of the benefits of using data sets. The other benefit is profiling the data and being able to look at it visually, what the basic statistics of the data looks like. Once we have registered the data set, then from there on out, in all of our future notebooks, all we have to do is dataset get by name, and provided the workspace, provided the dataset name, and then we can specify which version we want. In this case, I want to get the latest version, and then I take the dataset and I take 10 rows from it, convert it to a pandas data frame so I can visually see the data. So we'll go ahead and run this cell, and you see here the cell is currently executing, and it has registered the data set and saved it off into our dataset area, and now I can switch this and look at it as a pandas data frame. Let's take a step back and go in and find our dataset named COVID_train. So if I go back to Machine Learning Studio and now click on Data Sets, then we'll see here we have our COVID-19 train. And you will notice here that it was just modified right now because of the current upload that we provided, as well as you can see here all the tags that we provided for this data set. As we click into this data set, then we'll have the opportunity to look at various attributes of the data set, including which data store it came from. So again, this is the name of our default data store, and this was the path that we provided. From here, I can click on consume and I can see simple Python code for how to consume this. So again, connect to the workspace, and then you can say dataset get by name, and then you can change it to a pandas data frame. From here, I can also explore the data, meaning actually take a look at the data. But more interestingly, I can look at the profile of this data. So I can very quickly see here various histograms of what the columns represent, and then all of the basic statistics, as well as some descriptions of the data listed across. So as I go through this, I can click on any of these and be able to get different box and whisker plots, histograms, value counts, as well as column statistics here on the bottom. This is very powerful for a data scientist to be able to very quickly look at their data sets as they start using them for machine learning training. And then we can always create a new version of this data set. And you can see here there are 3 versions as I registered the data set over and over. So again, we'll be able to audit our machine learning model easily by going back and saying specifically give me version 2 of this data set or version 1 of this data set. When I go back here to our environment, we can see here again, just to walk through this one more time, we connected to our data store, we got our specific data file, and we said from delimited files, and then we went ahead and registered it as called COVID-19, and we said create a new version for this. We can then from there continue and do the same thing for other files. So here you can see we're doing test.csv. And finally here we are doing submission.csv. So in this talk, what we have gone through is the ability and the idea of being able to work through a workspace, compute, use the default data store, where we could have also registered a data store being an external data lake, right? But in our case, we use the default data store. And then finally, we actually got a CSV file registered as a data set, and we explored the file that's in that data set, as well as we explored the profile of the data that's in that data set. I hope you have enjoyed this session, and we look forward to recording more sessions for you. Please provide comments and feedback if this was useful and what other information you would like to get. Thank you so much. Take care.